Hey, everybody. Welcome to Love and Reload, the voice of the relocation industry. I am your host, Ben Cross, and I am super excited on this wonderful Monday to be here with Larry Brouder, Global Vice President for Kinetix Relocation. Larry, how are you doing today?
I got to say, I'm equally excited. I didn't think it was possible, but you've kind of got me to that level. So thank you. I appreciate it. Everything's great. Happy to be here on a Monday.
Where in the world are you right now, Larry?
I am in Shelton, Connecticut, which is the second relo hub of the universe.
What's the first?
I think the first is Danbury, supposedly, but we all cut our teeth in Danbury, but now we're down here in Shelton.
Isn't that crazy? And I guess if you look at Danbury being like a suburb of New York City, I guess it kind of makes sense. But I mean, like Danbury does seem to be like the epicenter of the first. I'll say the first. It's like there's like these like empires of the world, right? The Constantinoples and the Romes and and then there's these waves, right? But it does seem like the first epicenter of the relocation universe, and then people kind of spread out from there. And then you could argue if Danbury is not currently or no longer, let's assume it's not for one moment here. What will be the new epicenter of the global mobility universe in your opinion?
It's the great thing is it's like the epicenter will be the planet, because I think that everybody may have started here or in Oak Brook, Illinois, or in California, and there was hubs for the longest time, and then like Cork, Ireland became popular, and now it's really becoming everywhere, and that's just fantastic. It's a super, we've always seen at some of the industry events that you meet these amazing diverse group of people, and you start to realize it truly is everywhere. So I think now, and especially with COVID, as we come out of COVID, we'll see that people will just pop up all over the radar, and everybody, the great thing is everybody that started in that core group, super talented, and now that talent has spread as well.
Well, and it's kind of like what we're seeing in the general workforces that we serve and support, right? Where this work from everywhere and this dispersed workforce, and new epicenters for technology in every town now is a technology hub for a region. Before we get into that, because I really want to talk about that and get your take on that right now, I want to ask everybody that's watching right now. We got a bunch of people from LinkedIn coming in and Facebook and everywhere. So go ahead, hit that like button. Okay, that is our currency. Send a little heart out to Larry. Give that round of applause to get us started like we're in real life, get the juices flowing. Also, throw your name, company in the comments. Let's get some shout outs going. I want to know where in the world you are right now. I want to know what you think the mobility epicenter of the world is or will be in the future. Just kind of a fun little question.
We're going to have people that we're going to have to it's going to be fisticuffs. There's going to be people saying.
I think a lot of people are going to vote for like their home office as the new epicenter of the Relo world. Let's see, Nicole Barilli, what's up? Hello, Nicole. Good to see you. Ray Abbott from Vancouver. Tom Brune checking in. Hello.
Oh, he's in Denver.
Yeah, there it is. Hey, and Tom, Janet's out there in Denver right now. She's cooking dinner. It's not too late to RSVP.
Yeah, they're having, I think they're having eggplant parmesan.
Eggplant parm with a farinata di cicci and a little bit of tapenade. Janet texted me this morning. She's like, send me the tapenade recipe. She got me this wonderful book that has a tapenade recipe in it. So Tim Quirk shouting out. Let's see here. We got Sandra Clary. Sandra, I got a big box of cookies that I think you're behind today over here. She's trying to put some weight on me, Larry. I'm not going to let her.
You were supposed to mail some of those out, but I didn't see them. So
seriously, I'm the last guy that needs cookies. I'm sure there's like 99.9% of the population that needs some cookies ahead of me here. Let's see. Eve O'Reilly. Hello from Hilton Head. Oh, rub it in. Why don't you? That's great. Elizabeth Hotsy. There we go. Tim Quirk, Sandra Clary. EDC from Alexandria, Virginia. The new epicenter of innovation and technology is LinkedIn networking.
Ooh. That's very close to the truth right there. That's a good statement.
What do you think about that, though? I mean, so we kind of came at this from a geographic standpoint, right? But I mean, how much more important is the virtual realm than the physical realm becoming? I mean, what do you see? Do you see a shift there, Larry?
It's really becoming everything. I don't think that physical relocation, I think once COVID is kind of under control, people will yearn to be with people. So I do think from an overall innovation standpoint and everything that there will be kind of a recoagulation of people. But right now, and especially, I work on the sales side of mobility. I work in operations. I work in policy. And what I see is LinkedIn is becoming the conduit for all of the discussions to happen because it's very easy to connect. It ties into other media really well. And it's someplace where that network really works effectively. So I think great things have happened in the sharing of information. Relo for the longest time was a very closed circuit and very competitive, and people were afraid to talk about whatever they had. I'd go to conferences on technology and Relo, and nobody would say what they had because they were afraid.
What they had, nobody'd show it.
Yeah,
right?
nobody would show it. Now that's changing, and I think that's where the big changes and the acceleration of innovation is going to happen. Is that now people are saying, okay, I have this, let's share it, and companies are becoming more, competitive and cooperating at the same time. That whole old school co-opetition thing is back.
So that's interesting. You talk about technology, right? And the way that we share or don't share, right? Historically. And I agree, there seems to be a shift, and it's always the desire to share and collaborate precedes the actual, the market by a few years. But right now, what I'm hearing, a lot of the conversations being had on this platform and others is about integration. And it's about, and Sandra, I'm going to give you guys a plug because EDC has been at the forefront of this talk. But companies like EDC, we've had some smart people from some other RMCs on here as well, and everybody's talking about integration and being able to integrate systems. And of course, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, but of course, the RMCs are saying, or a lot of them are saying, or maybe their silence is saying, we think our system is proprietary. We don't really want to integrate. We don't really want to open it up. What we've built is more valuable closed than open. How do you balance the need for proprietary knowledge systems and processes with the desire to become more efficient through integration and interoperability?
That's a great question, and it's a critical question because I think all of us, we're just as guilty. We have a proprietary system that was built initially around facilitating really fast service in high volume international climates. So and so it was purpose built for that, and it worked really, really well. But now there's such great tools coming out that can be integrated that you have to look that way, and you have to, and ours, like everybody else's, has to become compatible if it's not compatible. Otherwise, we're just going to have to take a bunch of stuff off the shelf and glue it together. So one of the things that we've done is looked at, and we've actually used some systems that we can do conversion processes with, and that we can integrate things with. There's the question kind of ties into what you're doing with the system and the size or impact of the system, because these little things from mobile apps that we can just tack on to our service offering, super easy, great functionality. There's some really neat work. You've had some people on your show actually that have done some really neat work in creating mobility-based social networks. And those things are fantastic because the success of the assignee is going to be based on their integration into the location. So why shouldn't we integrate systems that allow them to do that in an easy way on their phone in ways that they're used to?
Yeah, I think you bring up some great points. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments right now. Leave questions for Larry and I. Your comments on this stuff. Are we right? Are we crazy? Maybe both.
Well, we're crazy, yeah.
Who knows, right? They're not mutually exclusive, right? You could be right and crazy at the same time. What's that saying? Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean somebody's not out to get you. And I want to talk about the future of relocation. I want to talk about where's the industry going. Is the industry healthy and thriving? Is it dying? Let's be honest about that. I want your take also. If you're watching right now, throw it in the comments. And then Larry and I are going to riff on that for a little bit. As we do that, I want to give some shout outs. Tom Brune's asking what's for dinner, Janet. It sounds like he's considering coming by. So Janet, let him know, DM him. I don't know if you got a spare chair that's 6 feet away from the rest of the people or not. Amy Jacobs, hello from Dallas, Texas. Eve, Mobility Epicenter, South Carolina coast. I mean, if you can work from anywhere, why not work from Hilton Head?
Yeah. That's hard to beat.
Are you seeing this, Larry? Are you seeing work from anywhere being a long-term work from home, and then work from anywhere being a long-term trend?
I think that's on everybody's mind right now, especially in mobility, because we don't want our industry to die, but we know that it's dying, or it's shooting itself in the foot at least. And so I think that I saw survey data today that said 60 some odd % were saying that they look forward to being back in a combined environment, an office environment. But 30+% were saying, nope, it's here to stay. We're working from home. We've allowed flexibility during this, and we adjusted really easily to it. So, and it works well. So it may change our space needs and our costs, and we may consider it due to that. But I think that, I go back to my earlier statement. I think people are going to want to be together to collaborate and to innovate. And I think that happens really well online, but it happens really, really well or better face to face. So I think we're going to go back a little, but not everybody's going to participate. I also think that one of the things that we'll probably discuss today, as we look at global nomads and say, who's going where, what are the considerations? Now we're seeing a lot of articles come out about tax implications and things like that. So the great thing is the advice from the industry has caught up to this really big surge of a trend in global nomads.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. So let's talk about digital nomadism, global nomads, work from anywhere, and how the mobility industry can respond to that. Shout out to Ryan Watroba from sunny upstate New York, Janaina from Brazil, Joanna from Sweden. I love when the international folks come out. Thank you so much. Great to see y'all. These are all, you know what's great about those people? I don't know any of those people like in real life, but they're like my best friends online. I that's the beauty of this platform. Like I never met, I met Janaina. Sorry, Janaina. Love you in real life too. But Joanna from Sweden, like we just became friends via this virtual platform. Mark Colmer checking in. Hi from Denver, Colorado. Marco Major from McAllister's out in Chi-Town. Hosea from Cali. Hosea's on the move. He's a digital nomad right now. He's in Seattle one day. He's in Phoenix. Now he's in California running a company from the road. I don't know. Is that you working on the RV, Hosea? What's going on, man? How does that work? Tell me. I'm interested. Martin Foxwell. Good to see Martin on here. Valerie McKenzie checking in. Amanda, Henri from Bordeaux. Annette, Amy Jacobs. Amy says, what are your thoughts on the international relocations coming back? If so, do you think that it will be handled the same due to COVID-19? Let's take Amy's question right now.
Yeah, great question. It's been really interesting to follow the trajectory of it. And the second wave of COVID has not impacted in the same way as the first. So as we looked, and we operate really, 85% of our business is international. So, but we do a really substantial amount of U.S. business and U.S. inbound, outbound. So as we looked at COVID, the everything was turned off in March, April maybe, and went to zero. And so we kind of looked around and said, what do we need to do to adjust to ride it out? Government money helped. Some things that we did, reduce pay and things like that helped. And we knew that we could survive it. So our surviving it was based on an initial wave and then reduced second waves, where the whole world started to kind of get back online and everything was working pretty well. This second wave has been unprecedented. And I worked in HR in Denver, actually, and back in Colorado in Broomfield. and worked a lot during the avian flu scare and pandemic. And so we were drafting things saying, okay, if we stockpile Tamiflu and if we have systems and stuff set up for certain work structures, we'll be fine. Nobody ever expected the response like this. So I think that international started to come back already. And we saw in August and September a surge of business because people were like, oh, let's get it done now, because I think we're going to beat the next curve or the next wave. Now we're seeing a little bit of a retraction, but not completely. So it's almost like the impact of COVID is worse right now than I think people are taking into consideration. But there's this COVID fatigue that's creating this push to get a bunch of stuff done before year end and tax and everything else. So
yeah, I see the COVID fatigue being interesting, because it's almost like, on the one hand, it's a fatigue, but on the other hand, it is almost an apathy, you know, whereas COVID is worse by the numbers, is worse in the United States than it has been ever. And yet I think that most people would say that their appetite for risk around COVID is greater now than it was in June, meaning people are a little less scared of it than they were then. Right or wrong, not going to make a comment on that. I'm scared to death of it, but yet I find myself taking more risks than maybe I would have a few months ago. I'm still a mask guy. I'm still a mask in public. I was at a park yesterday with my kids. I'm wearing a mask. One of the only people, whatever. Point being, though, is I don't cringe as much when I get in an elevator as I used to, let's say, just little things like that, right? People are considering getting on airplanes now when they weren't 6 months ago, even though the COVID rates are double what they were then, right? And so I think, to me, that's interesting dynamic too. So to your point, like, COVID-19 is worse than it was then, but yet we seem to have been loosening things up in some ways more so now. And here we are with this second spike. And Henri says, and I think this is an interesting comment, Henri, when he nails it, it's so rare that we stop the program and we take the question. He says, in France, a panel of scientists, medical doctors, biologists, etc., appointed by the president are envisioning at least 2 more waves after this one. Yeah.
I don't think that's far-fetched. I think that what's going to happen is there's some talk today with Pfizer's announcement. If they have a 90% efficacy in a COVID vaccine, that first thing's going to happen is there's going to be a bunch of adopters. There's going to be a bunch of people that say, no way am I going to be the first group trying that out. Their test group was 45,000 people. I mean, it's the size of a town in New England. So I think that there'll be some adoption. There'll be some rejection or fear. And all of that's going to happen as this wave tones down a little bit and we get ready for the next one. So I think he's spot on. I think that actually it'll be around for a bit.
Yeah. Interesting. We got some great questions coming in. I'm going to prioritize your questions and comments. You guys are the viewers out there. You're taking time out of your workday to watch this and ask these questions. So I've got all these notes and everything. I'm going to focus on your questions right now and prioritize those. So keep them coming. I don't care how amazing or terrible they are. We're going to ask them. Annette says, how do you risk assess differently now than a few months ago? What have you learned, or is it just being tired of it? This is personal. I want to hear your personal take on this, Larry, but I want to hear your take as a person that manages a business. And then I want to also hear your personal take on this.
Yeah, because they're kind of different. When I think, like, I don't want my family to risk anything, but my daughter's an athlete. My wife is in real estate. They have to be around people. And the real estate side, they're being super cautious, and they have a protocol. That's a pretty solid protocol. And so that's worked really well. My daughter is on a school program where she does 2 days off or 2 days on and 3 days off. So I think that we've made accommodations to try to keep people as separate as possible in our personal lives. We talked about it a bit. I do stuff at the gym. I do martial arts stuff, and it's close contact. And so we wore masks between the 2 waves. went back to the gym. Everybody was really okay. We were super cautious about sterilization of mats and everything. But now that's getting, we're kind of hitting the peak of the second wave. It's getting scary again. So we may have to shut that down. So on a personal, I think everybody's making their own personal choices. It's becoming less politicized, and I hope that it continues to be. Sorry, my lights turn off with motion.
It's important to save energy, Larry.
Yeah, and so everybody's making their own decisions, but I think they're making more educated decisions now. On a business, from a business perspective, there's two parts to it. We told everybody to go home, work from home. We're really good at working from home. It's fine. The technology supports it. We can do our job from anywhere. For larger companies that we work with, manufacturing companies, we work with some NGOs that have to be global. They did some things that I saw back in my HR days where the business continuity and risk people and the HR people and everything, everybody got together. And mobility during this time became part of that discussion. They got a seat at the table, and many of them had it already, which was great. But I think it really integrated because now you have people on the road and people on assignment and people in the middle of a domestic U.S. transfer where they were going to buy and sell a property when COVID really took hold. And so all of a sudden, yeah, you're in front of the C-level of the company. You're doing risk assessment in the way that they assess risk for other things. I think that's been a benefit to the mobility role in the integration of HR mobility and talent management into the real risk assessment discussion in the company. It's really boosted that discussion a bit.
We've got some good questions coming in. Some of these we've kind of touched on a little bit before, but I did promise to ask them all here. Really quickly, Lindsay says, how much of your workforce is working remotely now, and will that amount increase or decrease going into 2021? How do you think working remotely will impact relocation? What are your thoughts about your personal workforce, but also maybe more importantly, the workforce that you support? What are you hearing about increase or decrease going into 2021?
So yeah, we're hearing there's a lot of planning going on. And it's interesting because the planning comes in waves too, because people have to adjust and they're getting really good at adjusting on the fly. From our perspective, 90% of us are out of the office. We have people that do come in, but it's a really sparse crew and everybody has a closed office, so they don't have to be in close proximity to other people.
Is it like senior level? Is it?
Yeah.
Who are those people? Like what kind of profile do they have?
Operational, like the director of the operational side, the head of the company, the head of our office in Virginia. It's really kind of senior operational is probably how I define it. From our client perspective, we see that there are companies in our client base that manufacture things that run in certain seasons. So they're impacted seasonally. And some of them ramp up in the fall, early to late fall. And we saw them really struggling because they had to make sure their people were safe. So they were making plans to kind of accommodate their seasonal surges. But they were doing so in a really, really reserved kind of cautious fashion. Their mobility programs had people kind of stacked up and waiting to go, and they still do. And we're seeing a lot of that right now. So there's still a lot of pent up mobility volume out there.
That's what I'm hearing too, right? And these people are on hold. They still want to execute on these plans. I think part of that is also with the hope that we will have a vaccine, month, 3 months, 6 month. It's going to happen. We don't know when. It's going to happen, and when it does, I think a lot of people are ready to, or a lot of companies are ready to make those bets again. And they also realize, I think, as much as they want to enter into austerity mode, there's a lot of opportunity in the marketplace, and it takes more time and money to tear it all down, and cost cutting than it, and then rebuild it back up, to react when the demand comes back, than it does to just kind of like chill out a little bit, cut some costs near term, maybe some salary reductions, right? I think we've seen that a lot, right?
But I think that Lindsay's question, like working remotely, it won't go away. It'll potentially be another route for employee relocation, because I think that there were companies that we were talking. I talked to a kind of a really innovative HR consulting group just before COVID, and we were having this really engaged discussion about making people's pre-retirement assignment an assignment to where they want to retire, so that we would retain them. And I think it was a great, and it's still going on. That discussion's still going on. So I think now they're saying, well, listen, we want to keep you as long as we can keep you because you're super valuable. Our rehire cost for that position could be 50 to 80 grand. Let's look at the potential relocation budget to put you where you want to be for your final placement in the company. And those discussions are happening.
The Florida office is going to be full of, more senior people who are 5 years from punching out,
Yep.
The Arizona office, yeah.
Well, I mean, go back to Hilton Head. Like people are going, maybe I want to go down there. If I can, negotiate a budget to get moved to Hilton Head as my final, I've just moved to my retirement location. I'll work for another 10 years. I'm happy to do it.
Well, and the office doesn't have to be on Hilton Head Island. It can be in interior South Carolina where you have cheap real estate. People can buy their retirement home in Hilton Head. They can commute the 30 minutes or 45 minutes inland, and know that they have that golf community retirement also. This is so interesting. And I've never seen, and I'm still young, I guess, and maybe that's why, but I've never seen the needs and desires. I'm not even going to say needs, the wants and desires of the labor force influencing company policy so much as I do now.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to make of it. I don't know necessarily why. I mean, I have thoughts on this, but do you see that too, Larry, where people's just wild hairs are now influencing the company policy?
It kind of goes against the grain of the way that we were reading millennials before all this. So, we were kind of saying, okay, they can work from anywhere, and as long as they're tech enabled, but from the mobility perspective, we were seeing that they needed a lot of hand holding, and they needed support not when the systems broke down, but kind of to educate in the system. So if you sat with people and educated for a bit, then they were off and running. They were fantastic. But now, you would think with a glut of people in the marketplace for any position, supposedly, that's not entirely true, that companies would say, no, you know what, we can hire anybody from anywhere. We don't have to put the money into it or put the time into it or the effort. And yet they are. So it's a little bit paradoxical in offering people all sorts of things to kind of keep them happy. It's almost like what people are going through. And so, you're trying to keep the super talented ones on the line by giving them the freedom.
Henri says we've all become millennials. I do.
I love to go backwards. Yeah.
I love making that joke though, right? I mean, as soon as I see older, more senior people saying, gosh, and then they say something very millennial-esque, and I just bust their chops because 5 years ago they're busted mine, right? Michael Quigley says Florida sounds good to me. He's freezing up in Cali. Janet says I'm on the cutting edge, Florida life. She did that same thing, and 100%. Everybody's all about the golf cart life. I'll tell you what, that golf cart living is amazing.
I need snow and seasons.
Yeah, you're a season. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Joanna asks, I think, the question on everybody's mind, and I think this definitely bears a conversation, even though we didn't really plan on this. But Joanna says, what are your thoughts on how relocation and mobility may be impacted positively or negatively with President-elect Biden as our new president?
And it is on everybody's minds. And I think that as we were going into 2020, we knew that 2020 was going to be volatile. We knew that there was going to be this polarization, especially impacting things in real world like immigration. So, we had our tax impact at the beginning of the last administration. It was painful to say the least. Huge kind of impacts all the way around and change of policy. But then towards the end of this administration, or 3/4 of the way through, we saw significant impacts based on protectionism relative to immigration. And so A lot of companies, I was talking to somebody today, we had people coming in that we literally had to call them and say, get off the plane, because as of this morning, you can no longer enter the United States in the way that you wanted to. And so, there was lists going around of countries. There was some restrictions that were immediate and hard to navigate. And we had to navigate those for our clients. So I think that what people are looking forward to is a slower pace of change to things like immigration and tax. I mean, I'd love to think that some of those tax laws that impacted the taxability of domestic U.S. relocation are going to go backwards a little bit. I've lobbied with ERC on that stuff and hope that there's some view to that. But I also think from an immigration perspective that there will be a slowing of the really volatile atmosphere, and there'll be a removal of some of the stuff that's restrictive. There are a lot of people waiting for green cards. There are a lot of concerns that the right talent won't be able to come in. And think of it from a U.S. company perspective. I worked in engineering. There weren't enough graduates of the engineering type that we needed in the United States to hire. Like, we could hire all of them. So, as things happen, we needed immigration to support that. So a US-based company would be functional and survive. And we lost sight of that somewhere along the road. So I do think we'll get back to a more measured approach to immigration and immigration support.
Yeah, I think there's so many layers to what creates a healthy relocation climate, right? What creates demand for our services, relocation, global mobility. And I think the domestic is different from international. I think the drivers, and maybe more importantly, the obstacles are different. The impediments are different. But I think that the thought that I was hearing going into this election was very binary, right? It was very, Trump pro-business, Biden more taxes, or something like that, something reductive like that. And I thought it was really interesting after it was clear that it was going to go Biden. What you saw in the stock market, to me, honestly surprised me. You saw a lot of confidence in the stock market. You saw it kind of roaring back. I don't know if that was due to they were betting on Biden. I don't know if they were betting on this new presidency to deliver a vaccine that was going to pull us out of this thing. I don't know if they were betting on, a potential end of a Chinese trade war where we could have the steel and raw materials necessary to bring back, to really ramp up manufacturing in this country. I don't know what it was around per se, but there was a sustained week-long rising in the market.
Yeah, I mean, look at today, and today is, today's vaccine related, but I think that it's also residual election related. And when the big shift there was when Goldman Sachs came out and said, this is probably going to be good for the economy. And I think you can take either side. I tend to be kind of mediating in my discussions. In my private life, I'm super polarized and I tend to be like really, really aggressive about it. But from a political perspective, I think, and even from a societal perspective, I think we're looking for stability. So our relationships with countries need to be mended to a certain extent. I think that the approach on things like tariffs was one of those things where if you looked at it at its core, the intent was okay, but the execution was not. And so I think that was a big challenge. I think we might have lost Ben, so we'll have to see. Ben is still there. And I don't know if that, there he is. Oh, you're muted too, Ben.
I was going to give you the spotlight for just a second while I get my power cord situation straightened out. So you just run with this. Is your moment, Larry. Okay. So
I think, I agree. Do what you need to do. I mean, if we see you ducking under your desk, I have that effect on a lot of people. So a lot of times during discussions like this, people start to hide under their desks or put their earplugs in. But I do think that, and I do think that the stability is one thing, but from a tariff perspective, a measured approach to that as well, where people look at it and say, how are we being treated in this individual instance? Let's find a way to negotiate it effectively, as opposed to let's shut the door or let's impose something and have it be drastic. The swings are too big. We need the swings to be measured but impactful, because some of those ideas weren't bad ideas, they were just executed the wrong way.
Yeah, and you alluded to, and I wanted to call it out specifically, the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, right, which was passed, early in the administration, which was a huge boon to business. And I hope I get this right. It lowered the corporate tax from 35% to 21%. And the idea there was to give a lot more cash to businesses, which they can then reinvest. It may translate to wages and equipment and all sorts of things that are great for the economy. But part of that was an elimination of a lot of itemized deductions. And one of those itemized deductions was the moving expense deduction, right? For people who relocated and they were allowed to deduct the cost of their move and temp housing and some other things. And now they can't. And we are slowly kind of seeing more adoption of these lump sum policies. And frankly, from people who are in the managed relocation business, who are also in the employee experience business, that has not been a good thing for our industry, right? It's hard to say whether or not the tax cuts have helped business growth and mobility, but I'll tell you what, from a managed relocation service provider standpoint, it has not translated to more corporate moves. So I think, I'm not sure if this administration definitely wants to change taxes. He talked about rolling back some of those tax cuts. I don't know if that means he's going to reinstate the itemized deduction if he increases the corporate tax, meaning the new president-elect. But it remains to be seen. But I think the sheer impact to the H-1B process being untouched and administered in the way that it's supposed to be administered, and the rhetoric around the welcoming of foreign nationals who are skilled workers to our country to improve our economy and allow us to be productive and our companies to be productive and become the number one talent destination in the world. I think that's exciting from a person who likes to move people all over the world.
And we're so close. Like from an innovation perspective and an incubation perspective in new business, and like the United States truly is the most amazing place for things like that to happen. And I think a lot of people hunkered down and did a lot of creative stuff over the past 6 to 9 months. And so, as you went, kind of covering your statement, I agree. I think from a tax perspective, I'd like to see some of the stuff that impacted Relo retracted a little bit. But when the rate goes to 21 to 22%, it's got to come from somewhere. And so, I do think there'll be a lot of number crunching to determine how to find that balance, because the debt is not sustainable.
Oh, the debt's out of control.
So, and trickle down, the impact is just kind of nominal in most cases. So, from a kind of like attempted trickle down perspective, you saw a lot of stock buyback. You saw a lot of people shoring up for pandemic once the money was out there. And a lot of companies had a lot of money in their pocket at the beginning of it. So, probably good that they had it because they survived longer. But the pandemic is such an odd event that it wasn't that they were planning for that in the first place. They were just putting money in their pockets. So I think that'll be a really interesting thing to watch over the next year or two, because immigration will kind of normalize. We'll start looking at what talent we really need. Companies, we looked in Relo and we said, okay, we're getting this break on our tax rate, but we're paying for it in our gross up of household goods moving or something like that. So, there's a balance to it no matter what we try to do. I just hope that the industry has legs enough to survive it.
And let's talk about surviving it. Steve Miser, shout out to you, sir. a driver, household goods driver. I always want to show respect for the household goods drivers. Steve, if you're still tuned in, I'd love to know, as a person who's likely under a 1099 contractor role, if some of the stuff that was on the ballot regarding contractors, if you see any impact to your function. I think a lot of people may overlook the impact of some of the 1099 workers and the way that they're classified and some of the things that are going on. I do want to talk, Larry, about the future of relocation and how we adapt and how we stay viable. We've got a ton of people on LinkedIn watching. This is fantastic. Jody Harris, what's up in Wisconsin? Good to see you. People are just catching up with one another. This is so nice. I love when people just catch up. Jody, let's see. Jody says, we have done some creative stuff, but specifically we ended up not employing people in the USA. We looked at where else they could go. Canada was one popular location. Jody, thank you so much for this transition, right? Yep. Mega trend here. And I don't think the horse is out of the barn yet on this. I don't think it's irreversible. But the trend, we're in the business of moving people to jobs. Yep. What happens when companies decide to move jobs to people? How, Larry, do we pivot to provide services that are meaningful, to add value to that process, to our clientele, in the event that they would prefer to move the jobs to people? What do we do?
Yeah, it's a great question. It will reduce volume without a doubt. Like, there's just no way around it. It's going to impact. I think that the statement it's more of a statement than a question. We actually saw what was happening in Canada in our volume, even in the past couple of months. And one of the immigration groups that I'm part of on LinkedIn saw those discussions taking place. I think Canada was watching it like a hawk, and saying we can benefit.
I mean, they have billboards, right? Didn't they have billboards?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Welcome to Canada. You're welcome here. Bring it.
Yeah. And so I think that they've created an environment that was kind of retooled and welcoming to do that. So as we move forward, as the jobs move towards the people, it goes back to individual services and a really fragmented delivery, because people will start to move where they want to move. And so if we have two builds, going on right now internally to accommodate that, because we see it as, if people have a cost-effective option to do their own thing, then have support from people that are kind of an educated purchaser in that environment, then they'll jump on it. But it can't be the old school. And we talked about it earlier. The death of relo is because people will cling to revenue models that are antiquated. So,
all right, you just went there, and I wanna go there because we got a little bit of time.
The hornet's nest is on the ground. We're gonna kick it for a while.
Let's kick the hornet's nest. Hopefully those hornets aren't too revved up. Cindy Salter, what's up, Cindy? Mary Riley, what's going on? Valerie, Jody, really quick, just to cap this off. Canada's been public about the fact that they could benefit. Agreed, we moved the job to Canada, but we still move the employee as well. Jody, could you bring them back? Would you bring them back? Let me know in the comments. But all right, the hornet's nest is on the ground. We knocked it down. We had the broomstick. We're hitting it. Is relocation dying? And if so, why?
Well, over the past couple of years, we've done everything possible to kill it on every side. And so at first, there's both sides of the coin. And I'm going to get fired for saying that there are client components to this and there are provider components to this. The over-commoditization of relo turned it into something that was pushed into boxes with prices next to them. And then the request was, do this. Like, I remember being on eBids for a company out of France where the cost went to zero immediately. So, you're saying, do this for nothing. Do this by getting referral fees and stuff, but you're paying for those referral fees. Like, you're paying for that. But make the employee's experience better. And so the great thing that pushed us to do was be more cost effective and employ systems that would better the employee experience. And so that part of it was great. I mean, I think it was the right way to throw a wrench into the relo world, and say, do it cheaper and make it better. But then it went into just procurement-driven commoditization, and it dropped the employee experience component of it. And so that's what will kill the relo industry. Like, we can figure out how to retool and make it work for certain price points, but we have to remember that there are people that care for the people that are being transferred in a way that make the experience the best possible experience. So we can't abandon the human side of it. We have to employ the technology to make it work effectively, but we also still have to care about the people that are moving.
Do you think that the employee experience and the purchasing goals of the corporation that they work for are misaligned? Do you think that, let me rephrase maybe, do you think that the way companies buy relocation is counter to, or inhibits the way that we deliver the service? I mean, are you saying these things are at odds?
They are to a certain extent, but I've seen companies do really good things in that space. So what they do is they kind of team up on it, and they say, okay, procurement, make it so that we can evaluate it in a common sense environment. And I'll give you an example. Relo for years would put out price documents in the RFP process, and then they put out their service agreement. The service agreement would have all these qualifications in it, so you never knew what you were paying. Now, procurement has kind of locked that down to a certain extent and said, okay, we want to know what we're paying. We're going to look at the service agreement. We're going to look at the pricing model. We're going to tie it all together relative to our current projected volume, our historical volume, et cetera. And then, if they're smart, then they reintegrate HR and risk and planning and the C-level, and they look at it from an experience perspective. Because they say, okay, from a price perspective, we know what we're dealing with. What are these companies able to deliver from an experience perspective? And so companies have started to get better at that.
So I'm going to ask you, and I want to give a couple of shout outs to a couple more people who have just chimed in, but I want to ask you, and I'm going to give you a second to think about this while I give shout outs. What is your proposal? How do we fix it? What do we do as an industry, service provider, RMC? I mean, I kind of corporate HR person, as we have some that are watching right now. How do we come together to fix this and solve it so that it works for all the stakeholders, the company, the employee, the service provider? I'm going to let you think about that just for a second. I'm going to give some shout outs here. Vinny Valverde. Vinny, what's up? How's that Kaiser treating you, brother? It would be interesting. It would be interested to understand, see the data for the number of employees and relocations that actually happen into Canada instead of the U.S. So, Vinny, am I reading into this that you question the people actually going to Canada instead of the U.S.? Interesting. Vinny says relocation will not die; it will adapt. We're basically like cockroaches of HR. We're just going to find another way. Oh, Vinny, I'm editorializing, but hey. Jody says we are looking at potentially bringing them to the USA later. Canada employment and work history was a good option for a better visa L and faster green card option as well.
Yep.
I think it's interesting how we discount some of the qualitative effects of these policies and just the way they're administered even, and just some of there's like a lot of devil in the details of some of these things. And how quickly are these things being processed, and how equitable does the process feel, and how welcoming do we seem, right? Whereas it's not just like, did you fill out the form or not, and how many are available, but interesting. So Larry, before I asked you a question on how do we reinvent this process to make it better for everyone, what are your thoughts?
It's a great question, and it's the most relevant question probably in mobility right now, because there's a way to do it. I don't think Vinny was wrong. I actually think he was pretty spot on. It's gonna adapt in a certain way. We have to let go of some of our operational and revenue-based models and kind of retool it. It's like, and I think the answer is an engaged discussion. So, from a relo sales perspective, from an RMC perspective, we're seeing, and we're seeing it across the industry, that people are starting to not respond to RFPs if they don't have a relationship, because they're
That's
just saying,
true.
listen, you know, we haven't had an engaged discussion to really understand what you need. And I agree with that. How could we truly give you a good representation of what you, of the services that we're going to apply to your needs if we don't know what they are? So I do hope, and I think that those engaged discussions will lead to the right solution. Very similar to ROI. You know, everybody struggled with ROI. A bunch of us were building ROI models back in the day, and we said, okay, return on investment is based on having all of the pieces to do the analysis. So if we have a super engaged discussion and we can carry a bunch of cost stuff into the client, and the client can bring to us their expectations for that employee from a numbers perspective and from a time perspective, we can build an ROI model. It's easy. Like
if you have the numbers that fit into the equation, but if they don't give you the numbers in the equation, then you can't do the equation.
Right, but it takes an engaged discussion with mobility. And so I think, you know, to your question and to Vinny's statement, that's really where it should go to survive, is a really engaged discussion where people have an understanding of what the client's environments are and their needs are, and they have a true understanding of the capability of the relo providers.
So a couple takeaways here from what I'm hearing from your 2 points. First thing I think you said that I think is actually brilliant, and I don't know that we have the courage to do, but is to not respond to RFPs when we don't know why we were invited. I mean, you know, do you know the courage it takes to do that? And Ryan Kientz over here just says RFPs, don't hate the player, hate the game. Puts a link in there. Confessions of a Price Hacker. A little plug, I'm sure, for his company. But I mean, at the same time, right? It's like, you know, the courage. I just did one of these 2 weeks ago with somebody, you know, and they're like, hey, you know, we got this big bid. I don't know why we got it. We just got it. Really cool. You know, I'm like, you know, we're just going to waste a bunch of time on this, right? Yeah, I know, but my boss says we have to fill it out. I'm like, hey, I'm going to do whatever you ask me to do. You're my client. I'm going to, you know, work up the numbers and blah, 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 blah. You know, we'll do the dance and everything. And then, of course, you know, they don't get called back. They don't get feedback on the process. Turns out they were just column fodder for somebody else who instigated the RFP. So in a way, what you're saying is service providers are contributing to this broken system.
Yeah.
Because we're the third necessary bid.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, you know, it's hard for, like you said, it's a hard thing to walk into my boss's office and say, we're not going to participate in this. And it's rare, but what we do and what everybody really should do is go back to the company that's asking and say, we'll do this, but we really need to have an engaged discussion before we do.
And you'll know right away based on that what their response is. No, we can't talk outside the RFP. Okay, well then you're not serious.
Right. Sure. So, and if you don't, then you're not going to get the information that's going to be valuable enough to have a good decision. So, you know, I think it's on both of us. I think it's on the RMCs to provide enough substance that it's meaningful. It's a meaningful discussion. Like, it's on us to, you know, we're supposed to be the experts in it. So we have to bring the substance and the reason. And then the corporate side has to be willing to have the engaged discussion. If we meet there, it'll be great.
And then to your point about the corporate side, and Jody steps up here to play with this phenomenal comment. And this brings to the second point here. Jody says, would love to hear about ROI models that companies have done with their clients. We are looking at employment movement, duration, and position changes against cost. Jody, yes. I mean, listen, we all want ROI. I mean, us service provider salespeople probably want ROI more than you do even, right? Because we all suspect that our services are worthwhile, but we can't prove it. And this is the conundrum of the situation, right? And Larry, I want you to respond to Jody, and I want to also take a moment. So go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. And so I think that the models that when we were working on them were most effective were, and the great thing about it, there's this great kind of time that we're in that the data is becoming more accessible. So especially if you look at kind of current data on an ongoing assignment, you can capture and consolidate tax costs, relo and housing and stuff like that. You can look at the employee's expected output and quantify that in a way relative to time within your organization. But those engaged discussions have to exist in Relo, and the Relo has to have the depth or the RMC really has to have the depth to do that data collection and capture for you. And then internally, within your corporate operation, you have to have people that participate in supplying information on the expectations on that employee. And so if you combine all of those things in the right pot, you can work out ROI. It's something where it's a relatively exacting science that people try to apply all of this extra stuff to, because everybody feels that their input has a cost associated. It can be overcomplicated very, very quickly.
Well, I think the number one thing that's missing here is companies can't quantify the ROI on their own employees. So how can we possibly quantify the ROI on employee mobility? I think that's the number one biggest variable is if you pay John Doe $100,000, how much is John Doe worth to you? Unless he's a salesperson or runs a plant or has some sort of P&L like directly attributable to him, if he's your legal counsel, if he's the director of accounting, it's really most jobs in an organization. Wild speculation is our purview here. Yeah. I'm going to guess that 50% or more of people that are relocated, the company couldn't really tell you the ROI on that person. They just know that this person's a valuable member of the team. They just know that this person brings more to the table than they take every 2 weeks, but they can't tell you how much more they bring to the table. So then therefore, how can I tell you how much? It's like baseball, right? Wins against replacement. Right? If you can't tell me how much this pitcher is worth, wins against replacement, then I can't tell you how much the pitcher that replaces him is worth more than he is. And I don't know if that made any sense whatsoever, but I mean, that's what
I'm still saddened by the trade of Mookie. So, I still have feelings about that, but I agree with you. And I think that, it's that quantification internally at the corporate side that's always super challenging. But back when I was on the corporate side, I kind of pushed that issue a little bit and said, what do you expect from this person? And if what you expect is ethereal, I expect to better the environment for the rank and file in this operational segment of our company. Like, okay, that's great. It doesn't have a number now, but I bet you in 3 years we can look at it and quantify it. So,
well, how do you control for that variable, though, right? Because there's other variables over the 3 years that have happened besides the new person coming into the environment. I mean, you could have bought new ergonomic chairs for everybody, and engagement goes. I mean, it's hard to suss out that, tease out that factor, right? And what I think happens with ROI is that ROI is a crutch for people who don't know what they're doing. Okay. And what I mean by that, my buddy last time drinking whiskey last night, right? And he's like, well, how much is a dram? And I looked up how much is a dram, right? Because they pour a dram of whiskey. How much is a dram? So I looked it up, and it says a dram is a Scottish definition for the amount of whiskey you can fit in your mouth. That's what a dram is. And then it occurred to me that the Scottish were not really preoccupied with exacting to the milliliter how much whiskey was in the glass. They cared more about the quality of the whiskey that was in the glass. And that to me was interesting because these people are experts in Scotch whiskey and they don't even care about the precision. And then it dawned on me that people that know what they're doing don't care as much about precision because they know if it's good and they know if it's not good. And it's like when you watch people cook, and some people cook with recipes and some people don't. And I would argue that the people that don't cook with recipes might have a bit more of a feel for what they're doing. So that is my unpopular opinion about ROI, but I don't mean to insult anybody.
But you know what? It's a great point because it's the overall health of the organization is fostered by the mobility of key talent. So mobility is critical, and putting the right people in the right places change the environment and change the complexion of different locations and make things run more smoothly. And there's a reason that people move. So It's exactly like Scotch whiskey. The quality of the health of the organization is fostered by the efforts that we make in this environment. So let's do that. Maybe you don't have to put a number to it, and you can just say your company is better off from this.
I like that, and I think that strong leaders have the courage and the ability to say that, and they have the credibility and the track record for people to believe it. And I think that ultimately is where we need to get to as a mobility industry. Tom Bruin says ROI can be measured with metrics that are not monetary in terms of talent, DE&I, career pathing, retention, etc.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, Tom. I hear you. I agree. This is interesting. Mickey, this could probably be a topic for an entire episode. Service providers have all the data that would help corporate make educated guesses, but it feels a bit like pulling teeth to ask, what are you seeing as typical policies, practices, et cetera? Likely, since clients probably have such a wide range of services they offer, feels like a black hole of data when building a new policy. Mickey, I mean, that's so interesting you say that, but I'll speak from the other side. I mean, if the HR side feels like a black hole of data, right? Well, how much is, do you have salary data on this employee that you care to share with us, right? Because that's a big factor of ROI.
The last sentence is a doozy. I totally agree. From constructing a policy perspective, we have a lot of companies that come to us and they don't have a reload program. We work with a lot of really small companies. And so we start to ask questions, and there is this vacuum of understanding about what the intent is of the move. They just say, we really need this person in this location. Once we dig down, we have great discussions, and it leads to kind of, what they should offer. It's a difficult discussion now because of COVID, because there are other things that influence it. But I do think that's a great statement. There is a black hole of kind of data and feedback. If you're looking at policy and you're saying, we want it to work, we want the experience to be good, we want it to be benchmarked effectively so it's similar to other people. Benchmarking was out the window in July. All of the policies that you're applying right now are being impacted by something that's a global event. Anything that was written prior to this August is probably not 100% effective because it's in an environment that you just didn't understand before then. So there's, do temporary tweaks to your policy, mess around with it a little bit and think about what's happening now and the ways you have to address it. It shouldn't be carved in stone when you write it. There should be some flexibility. I understand that you want it to be equitable and that you want it to be competitive against your competitors, but flexibility is the name of the game right now.
And here's a pro tip. Sit down with your favorite service provider over a dram and hammer that policy out, okay? If you really want to get to the ROI, tap into, loving how whiskey can help solve ROI problems. This is fantastic, Larry. I knew this was going to be a lot of fun. It's been spectacular. The comments have been tremendous. Thank each and every one of you for chiming in, for letting your voice be heard, for asking your questions and leaving your comments. I hope we got to all of them. If we didn't, I apologize. But there's always tomorrow. Thank you so much for being here. But Larry, before we go, I just want to ask you, do you want to leave us with kind of a final thought or something to chew on?
I'm hopeful about everything. I'm like, the glass is full of something. It's either full of air to breathe or water to drink. It's full. So I think that we're, if we all collectively are starting to go in the same direction, not from any ideological perspective, but let's all move in the same direction, just caring for each other, we'll get through all of this stuff that we're talking about. Our industry will survive, we'll be healthy. I am very, very positive about what's going on and where we're going.
Yeah, and I think whether you think you can or you think you can't, either way you're right. So you might as well be positive about it and think about the opportunities. That's a great word, Larry, and that's a great place to leave it. Hey, everybody, make sure you tune in tomorrow, same time, same channel, 4 p.m. New York time. Tomorrow, Tuesday, we've got Vivi Chayati, the CEO of Alto Vita. corporate housing company, global corporate housing company, and we're going to be talking about their new corporate housing symposium, which is coming up next week. So that's going to be super exciting. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. I really appreciate you. Have a wonderful evening. And Larry Brouder from Kinetix Relocation, thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Thank